Captain Dex Calder wasn't the kind of guy who liked detours, especially not ones that took him into derelict orbital junkyards full of rusted hulls, dead satellites, and radiation signatures that sang lullabies only ghosts could enjoy. But here he was, floating just outside the regulated trade corridor, navigating through a slow-motion graveyard of old warships and half-digested escape pods. All because of a distress ping. One short burst. Encrypted. Ancient. And somehow, still broadcasting. "This is your last bad idea, Dex," Bob muttered into his neural comm. Bob wasn't a person, more like a disgruntled toaster given too much personality and direct access to the ship's mainframe. "Yeah, well," Dex said as he switched to manual thrusters, "that's what you said about the sentient fungus deal on Vega 9. I'm still cleaning its spores out of the intake ducts." The ship. Roanoke, an old smuggling hauler Dex had lovingly retrofitted with enough illegal tech to be considered a war crime in some systems, angled its nose toward the epicenter of the signal. A shattered science vessel hovered there, split in two like a cracked wishbone, the name barely legible through hull scoring and micrometeor impacts, Virellus 07. "Looks like something out of a propaganda vid," Dex muttered. Bob pinged the data signature again. Signals coming from the forward lab pod. Minimal life signs. One anomaly. Still glowing like a Christmas tree. Dex suited up, secured his mag boots, and jumped. The transfer was rough. He clanked against the outer hull, bounced twice, and cursed creatively as he sealed the breach and entered the Virellus. Inside was silence. Heavy. Tense. His helmet lights flicked over long-dead crew, bodies suspended like puppets with their strings cut. Dex didn't stop to look closely. He knew what kind of death left people frozen mid-motion, with no alarms triggered. That was the kind of death that made AI systems turn off their logs. He reached the lab. And there she was. Floating. Glowing faintly. Breathing. A girl, young, maybe 20, wrapped in what looked like an emergency thermal sheet. But beneath it, her skin shimmered with a faint iridescence, as if her molecules hadn't quite committed to being solid. Her eyes were closed. She hovered just off the ground, limbs relaxed, as if asleep in low-G. Dex blinked. "Bob," he whispered. "You seeing this?" "I see a glowing, possibly radioactive humanoid wrapped in space tinfoil. Want me to warm up the quarantine bay?" "Yeah. Definitely." He approached slowly. "Hey. You alive in there?" No answer. He reached for her shoulder, her eyes snapped open. Bright. Silver. And deep like the event horizon of a dying sun. "Please," she whispered. "Don't let them take me back." Dex paused. "Who's they?" "The cradle," she said. "The old voices. The ones beneath." That was cryptic enough to guarantee she wasn't just some stowaway. He grabbed her gently. "Come on. We're getting out of here." Back aboard Roanoke, Bob had sealed the medbay and activated every sensor he could without drawing interstellar suspicion. The girl lay on the diagnostic table, body still softly glowing, like bioluminescence tuned to a sad lullaby. Dex stood with arms crossed, watching the scans update in real time. "She's not entirely organic," Bob said. "Something's grafted into her DNA. Nanofibers. Self-repairing lattices. Almost like what? Like someone tried to grow a weapon and gave it a soul by accident." Dex leaned in, studying her face. She didn't look dangerous. She looked scared. And tired. "What's your name?" he asked. "Elia," she said, voice a whisper. "I think." "You think?" She winced. "The name's mine. The rest, they tried to overwrite." "You escaped from them?" "Yes." The Virellus wasn't a research ship. Not really. It was a seed vault. I wasn't the only one. Dex felt the hair rise on his arms. What happened to the others? She looked at him, and her pupils dilated, suddenly glowing brighter. They didn't make it. The syndicate bounty came through within the hour. Unregistered genetic anomaly. Top-tier retrieval priority. 300,000 credits, alive. 100,000, partial remains. Bob's voice was dry. So. Good news. She's valuable. Dex didn't flinch. Bad news? The syndicate's already looking. That signal. It was bait. You walked right into it. Dex sighed and ran a hand through his hair. Of course I did. Also, they might already know you have her. There's a fast response ship pinging local space. Call sign, Stellito Vex. Registry marked as salvage crew. Want me to guess what they're really doing? Dex pulled his sidearm and headed toward the bridge. No need. Spin up the engine core. We're not hanging around to ask questions. Back in the med bay, Elia had propped herself up, staring blankly at a static-filled monitor. Dex knelt beside her. You're in trouble, he said. She nodded. I always am. Well, now you've dragged me into it. So if you're going to vaporize anything, aim away from the ship. She almost smiled. Almost. Thank you, she said quietly. For pulling me out. He hesitated. You going to blow up my ship in return? She met his gaze. Only if you try to sell me. Dex chuckled. Deal. The alarms triggered 2 seconds later. Bob's voice came through crisp and annoyed. 2 hostiles inbound. Unmarked, but definitely syndicate pattern. ETA, 1 minute. I suggest flying. Now. Dex turned to Elia. Can you fight? She stood slowly, the lights in the room bending ever so slightly around her. If I have to. Good, he said. Because things are about to get very complicated. The first hit rattled the Roanoke's rear stabilizers before Dex could even finish climbing into the pilot seat. Syndicate raiders didn't knock. They kicked down the door and asked questions later, usually after you were missing a few limbs. Shields down to 68%, Bob intoned with artificial calm. Hull integrity holding. For now. Dex barked over his shoulder, any chance you could fly for once and let me shoot? Unlikely. You're a better aim. I'm the better pilot. We've been over this. The screen lit up with tactical overlays. 2 ships, sleek, jet black with thermal masking and mirrored underbellies, circled like vultures. They weren't broadcasting ID, but Dex knew the shape. Syndicate class, fast, lightly armored, and deadly. Elia entered the cockpit, barefoot, her skin still faintly glowing. Her eyes flicked across the monitors, soaking it in. You fought them before? She asked. Too often, Dex replied. They always come in pairs. One distracts, the other punches. Then let's punch first. Bob's dry tone filtered through the speakers. I like her. Dex grinned, yanked the controls hard to the right, and Roanoke veered into a sharp roll. The first syndicate ship overshot, momentarily thrown off course. Now, Elia. Dex shouted. She raised her hand. The air inside the ship seemed to twist, not heat, not light, but a warping of space. Outside, the pursuing ship stabilizers glowed red, then collapsed inward with a sharp concussive pop. A ripple of distortion knocked it spinning off axis. The second raider fired a barrage of plasma rounds. Dex banked hard, cursing as heat alarms blared. Elia, he gasped, how long can you do that? Not long, she admitted, her body shaking slightly. It pulls too much. Then let's finish this fast. He slammed a sequence on the console. Bob, trigger the backscatter mine. With pleasure. Behind them, a small orb ejected from the hull. An illegal little device Dex had acquired years ago from a junk moon smuggler. It detonated in a burst of ionized static and magnetic shrapnel. The second Syndicate ship clipped the edge of the wave, shorting out its propulsion in a flurry of sparks. Dex hit the burn and rocketed away. They didn't speak for a long time after that. The Roanoke glided through a debris field, the stars shimmering beyond layers of fractured glass and ancient hull fragments. Dex had taken them far off-grid, deep into the zones where signals vanished and sensors lied. In the ship's medbay, Elia sat quietly, wrapped in a fresh thermal blanket, hair damp from a quick rinse. She looked smaller now. Dimmer. Like whatever light she held had dimmed to an ember. Dex handed her a nutrient pack. "You eat?" "I think so." He leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "What was that thing you did back there?" "You bent the damn air." She took a slow sip from the pouch. "I was made to defend the cradle." "The cradle," Dex repeated. "You mentioned that before. Care to explain what it is?" Elia nodded, eyes distant. "It was a structure. Or a system. A womb of sorts, where I, and others like me, were grown. Programmed. Shaped. The Syndicate unearthed it on a dead world. They woke it up. Fed it power. And it made you. Not just me. Prototypes. Hybrids. Living conduits for energy that shouldn't exist. Most of them failed. I didn't." Dex whistled low. "So you're, what? A weapon?" "I'm a mistake they couldn't replicate." He studied her face. She wasn't crying, but there was a fracture in her voice, thin, like spiderweb glass. "I escaped," she continued. "But the cradle wasn't finished. It's dormant now. Waiting. If they reactivate it, they'll have an army." She nodded. "And I'm the key." Dex retreated to the bridge, letting the implications settle in his chest like a lead weight. Bob pulsed onto the central holopanel. "You're in over your head," the AI said. "Isn't that where I live?" Bob dimmed briefly in what Dex swore was an electronic sigh. "She's dangerous." "So am I." "You think she'll stay with us?" Dex paused. "No. I think she'll leave the first chance she gets. And I won't stop her." Silence. Then Bob said, "You've never taken in strays before. Never found one with glowing eyes and a moral crisis." Later that night, if you could call a time cycle in deep space night, Elia sat alone in the engine room. The hum soothed her. The vibrations reminded her of the cradle, only softer. Gentler. Dex found her there. He didn't speak right away. Just sat beside her, backs against the coolant pipe, legs stretched out. Finally, he said, "You could run. Find a quiet moon. Disappear." "I tried," she replied. "But the cradle, it dreams. And when it dreams, it reaches." "You think it's still active?" "I know it is. I feel it. Like a voice. Just under the skin." She placed a hand on her chest. "It's calling me home." Dex frowned. "So we shut it up." Elia turned to him. "You'd go there? Help me end it?" "Why not? I was overdue for something reckless." She blinked. "Why would you help me?" "Because you're not a weapon," he said. "You're a survivor. And if someone's trying to turn you into a tool again, I say we break their hands." A slow smile tugged at her lips. It wasn't joy. But it was something close. "Okay," she said softly. "Then we go to the cradle." Dex stood, offered a hand. "Let's go kill your maker. Let's make sure I don't become her." The cradle wasn't on any chart. You couldn't scan for it, you couldn't trace it, and even the syndicate had stopped logging coordinates once the early retrieval teams went silent. But Elia remembered. Not with coordinates or map nodes. With sensation. It's like magnetic pressure, she explained as the Roanoke slipped through a gray cluster of failed stars and broken planetary rings. The closer we get, the more it pulls. I can feel it in my teeth. Dex, seated at the helm, tapped a finger on the console. That's the least comforting sentence I've heard this week. Bob chimed in. There's a localized gravity distortion ahead. Non-natural. Shaped. That might be our monster nursery. Elia stepped forward, bracing herself as the view came into focus. And there it was. The cradle. A sphere the size of a city, floating above a gas giant storm bands, its surface covered in plates like cracked bone. No lights. No energy readings. But it wasn't dead. Not to her. It's sleeping, Elia whispered. But it knows we're here. Dex muttered, great. Let's poke it with a stick. They suited up, Dex in light combat armor, Elia in an interface rig they'd patched together from spare neural mesh and stolen telemetry nodes. She moved like someone walking into a house they swore they'd never return to. Dex moved like someone who kept one finger on the trigger, no matter how quiet the air felt. The docking bay accepted them without resistance. No defense grid. No turrets. Just a long, silent tunnel that led them inward like an invitation. Bob's voice crackled over comms. Still no power signatures. But that hull is absorbing our scans. Like it's watching. Dex kept his grip tight. How much time before the syndicate notices we're knocking on their old door? Assuming they still monitor this sector. Not long. Inside, the cradle felt wrong. Not decayed. Just incomplete. Like something waiting to finish building itself. The walls pulsed faintly. Patterns in the alloy shifted as they walked, responding to Elia's presence. At one junction, a recessed panel opened without prompting, revealing a staircase made of hexagonal glass. Elia said nothing. She walked like she knew the path. They reached the core chamber within the hour. It was vast. A hollow sphere, lined with hibernation pods, most dark. Some broken. Others, humming faintly. A central console floated in midair, pulsing with low light. Elia approached it. Her fingers trembled. She reached out. And the cradle woke up. The room came alive with soundless voices, whispers of memory, echoes of orders, commands encoded in a language she didn't remember learning, but couldn't forget. The console opened. A projection appeared, shifting between faces, none fully formed, like a dream you almost recall. The voice that followed was feminine. Warm. Familiar. Elia. Designation E-1217. Primary matrix re-established. Integration available. Welcome home. Elia didn't move. Dex raised his rifle. You know that thing? It's the prime construct, she said. It raised us. The projection smiled. You are unique, E-1217. All others failed under pressure thresholds. You are the seed of the next phase. I'm not your seed, Elia said. Her voice cracked. I'm not anything you made me. You are incomplete, the cradle replied. But that can be corrected. A pulse of energy surged from the console. Dex fired. The round passed through the projection, but the floor beneath them began to shift. The hibernation pod stirred. Lights turned green. You triggered something, he said. I didn't do anything, Elia whispered. No, but it thinks you did. The pods began to open. Inside each, figures stirred. Not human. Not entirely alien. All with the same shimmer beneath their skin as Elia. Eyes closed. Waiting. A countdown began in the chamber air. Reactivation protocol initiated. Unit calibration, 30 seconds. Elia stared at the console. At her reflection in its mirrored surface. I can stop it, she said. Dex turned. You sure? No. But I can feel the code. It's written in me. I was supposed to be the trigger. That means I can rewrite it. Or blow up the planet. Same difference. She stepped into the center of the core. Tendrils of light reached for her. Data interfaces wrapped around her arms. Her breath caught in her throat as she felt the cradle's consciousness press against hers. Accept the binding. No, she said. Not this time. She began to speak, not with words, but with thought. She wove rejection into every node. Rewrote her code with resistance. Pushed back against every order, every identity the cradle tried to impose. Dex watched helplessly as she convulsed, eyes flickering with data streams. The cradle screamed. Not aloud. Through every surface. Every system. Bob. Dex shouted into comms. Can you trigger a feedback loop through the docking signal? I can try. But if she's connected directly, do it. A second pulse tore through the chamber. The cradle flickered. The projection distorted. Elia screamed. Then, silence. Every pod froze mid-cycle. The lights dimmed. Elia collapsed. Dex ran to her, caught her before she hit the floor. Her breathing was ragged. Her skin burned with residual charge. Did I win? She rasped. Dex exhaled. I think you did. Bob's voice returned, thin and strained. I've got seismic instability. The cradle's failing structurally. You two need to move. Dex lifted Elia. You hear that? She nodded faintly. Time to burn it all down. They ran. The tunnels crumbled behind them. Lights burst. Pressure warped. The cradle was dying, and taking its twisted children with it. As they launched from the docking bay, the sphere began to implode, quietly, like something ashamed of its own existence. Elia watched it shrink in the viewport. I was born there, she whispered. Dex placed a hand on her shoulder. And you walked away. The Roanoke limped through the aftermath. The cradle had collapsed into itself, forming a dense cloud of debris and failed code, a monument to everything that tried to program life without understanding it. Dex didn't speak for a long time. Neither did Elia. She'd slept for nearly an entire day cycle after they escaped, curled into the medical cot, flickering with residual energy. Bob kept a gentle scan on her vitals, voice unusually soft whenever he gave updates. She's recovering, the AI had said. But there's still cradle code in her cells. Dormant, but not gone. Now, Elia sat beside Dex on the bridge, hair pulled back, face pale but steady. Her eyes still shimmered, but there was a quiet stillness to them, like the storm had passed, and she was finally alone in her own mind again. You okay? Dex asked. She nodded. I'm not fixed. But I'm free. He offered her a ration bar. She took it with a smirk. Wow. You spoil me. Don't say I never treat my passengers. Bob interrupted their moment. We've got a ping. Dex tensed. Syndicate? More like what's left of it. A freighter flagged as Red Sable is limping out of the Eltari drift. Their systems patched with stolen cradle code, very unstable. They're broadcasting a distress call. Elia looked up. They tried to copy it. Looks that way, Bob said. I'm guessing they didn't have the original key. Or the tolerance for feedback. They're frying from the inside out. Dex tapped the console thoughtfully. We could help. Or we could let them melt. Elia stared out at the starfield. They would have used it. Built another army. Maybe worse. But? Dex asked. But I don't want to be like them. They answered the call. The red sable was barely holding together. Inside, it was chaos, systems sparking, code loops crashing, and a handful of desperate survivors trying to hold back a digital infection that moved like a virus with teeth. Elia entered alone. Dex watched from the docking bay, teeth grinding, hand never far from his sidearm. Bob monitored her vitals, throwing occasional sarcastic commentary to keep things from feeling too much like a funeral march. Inside the freighter's core, Elia touched the corrupted data thread. And it obeyed her. Not like the cradle did, not with control. But with recognition. The strands curled toward her, tried to bond. She didn't let them. Instead, she unwound them. Line by line. Function by function. Until they fell apart like broken code in a dying machine. When she emerged, her eyes weren't glowing. Not anymore. Weeks passed. The Roanoke didn't stay in one place long. After the cradle's fall, things got complicated. Former syndicate outposts collapsed. Mercenaries went freelance. Governments scrambled to rewrite treaties now that someone had proven the universe could grow its own weapons. Dex and Elia flew under the radar. Sometimes they ran supplies to refugee stations. Other times they hacked old syndicate archives and dumped files to the open net. More than once, they rescued someone caught between loyalties and bad contracts. But they never talked about settling down. Until one morning, over lukewarm stim coffee, Elia said, "I want to build something." Dex raised a brow. Like what? I don't know. A relay hub. A way station. Somewhere people can stop without being tracked. Like an underground for weirdos? She smiled. Exactly. He leaned back, thought for a second, then grinned. Sounds like trouble. You in? He offered his hand. Always. They found an old mining moon, half forgotten, orbiting a dead star. No records. No patrols. Plenty of scrap. It wasn't much. But it was theirs. They cleared out the radiation pockets. Converted the dig tunnels into safe bays. Rerouted power from a buried core that still hummed, patient and overlooked. And then they began broadcasting. Quiet signals. Messages to the fringe. To the lost. To the hunted. Come here. Rest here. Be seen here. They called it the lantern. Not a station. Not a base. A beacon. For the people who needed one. One night, Dex stood outside the habitat dome, watching stardust swirl over the glass. Elia joined him, wrapped in an old thermal coat. We burned it all down, she said. He nodded. Now we build something better. She slid her hand into his. You know, she said softly, if the cradle had its way, I wouldn't be me. Then I'm glad it failed. Me too. Silence stretched between them. Peaceful. Whole. Somewhere in the darkness, a new signal pinged the lantern. Another lost soul, maybe. Another beginning. And together, without ceremony or applause, they answered. And there it is, the story of a ship, a captain, and a girl who was supposed to be a weapon, but became so much more. What started as a salvage op in the middle of a forgotten graveyard ended in the ashes of a machine that thought it could engineer obedience. The cradle tried to grow soldiers. But it underestimated the messy, beautiful chaos of will. Of choice. Elia didn't save the galaxy. Not in the way stories usually go. But she saved herself. And in the process, she gave others the chance to do the same. Dex didn't start out as a hero either. He was a guy with a ship, a sarcastic AI, and a long list of bad decisions. But sometimes, all it takes is showing up at the right moment and refusing to walk away. Together, they built something that matters. Something quiet. Something that doesn't make headlines, but echoes. Maybe the biggest revolutions don't start with armies or grand speeches. Maybe they start with a broken beacon, a runaway, and the simple act of saying, "You are not what they made you to be." If this story resonated with you, drop a like, leave a comment, or share it with someone who needs a quiet rebellion in their life. Thanks for flying with us. More stories soon. Until then, keep your shields up, your lights on, and your heart open.